I ran through the hospital corridors as if my heart itself were dragging me forward. My shoes squeaked against the polished floor with each desperate step, echoing down the fluorescent-lit hallway like a countdown timer I couldn't stop. The smell of antiseptic burned in my throat. My breath came out ragged, torn. Every muscle in my 68-year-old body screamed at me to move faster, faster, because somewhere in this maze of sterile white walls, my grandson was dying. If you're watching this video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Now let's get to the story. My name is Linda Rolfe. Retired school principal. Widow. Grandmother to one boy, Evan, 7 years old, the only light left in a world that had gone dark 2 years ago when my son Daniel died. The phone call had come 40 minutes ago while I was folding Evan's clean shirts, the little superhero ones he loved. Tara's voice on the other end, clipped, detached, like she was reporting the weather. Evan's been in an accident. He's at Memorial Hospital. You can come, if you want. Then she hung up. No details. No reassurance. No trace of the maternal panic any mother should have when her child is hurt. Just that cold dismissal and the dial tone that followed. If I wanted? As if seeing my grandson in a hospital was some optional social call I might decline? But there was no time to think about Tara's strangeness now. Not when my grandson, my Danny's boy, the child I'd promised to protect with my last breath, might be slipping away while I wasted seconds analyzing his mother's tone. I'd grabbed my purse and rushed out the door, leaving the iron on, the radio playing, the dinner half made on the stove. None of it mattered. Nothing mattered except getting to Evan. The drive had been a blur. Red lights I barely remembered stopping for. Turns I must have made on autopilot. The hospital parking lot where I'd left my car at an angle across 2 spaces because my hands were shaking too hard to care about the lines. And now this endless hallway that seemed to stretch longer with every step. Room 214. The receptionist had said it twice, slowly, like she thought my age meant I couldn't retain information. Her sympathetic smile had made my stomach clench. That look people give you when they know something terrible and they're trying to prepare you without words. I clutched my purse against my chest as I searched the numbered plaques. 208, 210. 212, I was close. So close I could almost feel Evan's small hand in mine, could almost hear his voice calling me, Grandma Linda, in that way that made every worry disappear. Because that's what grandmothers do, isn't it? We show up. We fix what's broken. We hold the pieces together when everything falls apart. I had done it when Daniel died, when Tara fell apart, or at least, when I thought she had. I had been there every day since, helping with Evan, taking him to school, making his lunches, reading him stories at bedtime when Tara said she was too tired. Being the steady heartbeat in his little life. The number was right there, just ahead. My hand reached out toward the door handle. That's when I felt it. A hand shot out from a doorway beside room 214 and grabbed my arm with surprising strength. Before I could scream, before I could even gasp, another hand gently but firmly covered my mouth, and a woman's voice whispered urgently in my ear. Mrs. Rolfe. Hide. Don't go in there yet. I turned, startled, heart hammering for entirely new reasons now. She was a nurse, mid-40s, olive skin, dark eyes that burned with an intensity that was equal parts frightened and fierce. Her badge read Nurse L. Vega. Hide. I stammered against her palm, trying to pull away. My grandson. Trust me, she said, her grip tightening on my wrist. Not painful, but insistent. Desperate. Hide in here. Just for a minute. You'll understand. Please. She pulled me into a small supply room right beside 214, so close to Evan I could have reached through the wall, and closed the door, leaving just a sliver of light from the hallway. For a heartbeat, I thought she was insane. For another heartbeat, I considered screaming for security, demanding to see my grandson, pushing past this stranger who had no right to keep me from him. But something in her eyes, something in the desperate urgency of her grip, made me stay frozen in place. The room smelled of bleach and cardboard. Metal shelving units lined the walls, stocked with boxes of gloves, rolls of gauze, bottles of saline solution. Everything was labeled, organized, sterile. The overhead light was off, leaving us in shadows broken only by that thin slice of fluorescent glow from the hallway. My breathing was so loud I was sure everyone on the floor could hear it. My purse strap dug into my shoulder. My legs trembled from the run, from the fear, from whatever this was. "Please," Nurse Vega whispered from across the small space, her back pressed against the door. "Just listen. Don't make a sound. I'm begging you." There were tears in her eyes. I could see them glistening in the dim light. And then I heard them. Voices in the hallway. Right outside. Right in front of room 214, where my grandson lay. Tara's voice, smooth, controlled, with that professional tone she used when she wanted to sound reasonable. The tone she'd used at parent-teacher conferences, at PTA meetings, when she wanted everyone to see her as the perfect mother. And another voice. Masculine. Unfamiliar. Cold and calculating in a way that made my skin crawl. "Are you sure the paperwork's ready?" the man asked. "Yes," Tara replied, and something in her voice made my blood run cold. There was no grief in it. No fear. Just efficiency. "Once the life support authorization is signed, I can move forward with the trust fund transfers. The grandmother has no legal rights over Evan's inheritance." Daniel made sure of that when he set everything up. My knees buckled. Life support. Authorization. Trust fund transfers. Evan was 7 years old. What life support? What inheritance was she talking about? Daniel had left some money, yes, but it was supposed to be for Evan's education, for his future, not. I pressed my back against the cold wall to keep from collapsing. Nurse Vega moved closer, put a finger to her lips, her eyes wide and urgent. "Quiet. Stay quiet." The man, a lawyer, I realized from his jargon, continued. "And once the boy's condition deteriorates, the guardianship transfers to you completely. The insurance payout, the house Daniel left, the savings accounts. All of it. Approximately 400,000 in total assets. 400,000. Daniel's life insurance. The house he'd bought. The business savings he'd worked so hard to build. Once the boy's gone," Tara said, and I heard something in her voice I'd never heard before. It wasn't grief. It wasn't fear. It was satisfaction. Anticipation. Everything passes to me. Daniel always said I couldn't manage money. Turns out I'll manage all of it, once Evan's gone. The world tilted sideways. Gone. She had said gone. Not if something happens. Not, God forbid. Not if the worst should happen. Just, gone. Like it was inevitable. Like it was already decided. Like it was planned. A sound escaped me before I could stop it, a strangled gasp that I tried to swallow back down, but it was too late. It was out there, hanging in the air, and for a horrible second I thought they'd heard me, thought they'd throw open the supply room door and find me cowering there like a frightened animal. Nurse Vega moved quickly, her hand hovering near my shoulder, ready to steady me, to cover my mouth again if needed. But the voices outside continued. They hadn't heard. Or they'd mistaken it for some random hospital noise, a gurney wheel squeaking, a monitor beeping, the 1,000 other sounds that filled these hallways. My hands were shaking so violently I had to press them against my stomach. My whole body was trembling. My grandson wasn't dying from an accident. This wasn't fate or bad luck or a tragic twist of the universe. She was killing him. "And you're sure no one suspects?" the lawyer asked, his voice dropping lower, more cautious. Tara laughed, a soft, crystalline sound that I'd heard 100 times at family dinners, at birthday parties, at Christmas mornings. A sound I'd mistaken for happiness, for the joy of a mother who loved her child. "The doctors think it's an autoimmune condition," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. The pride. Like she was pleased with herself. They're calling it some kind of hemolytic anemia, his immune system attacking his red blood cells. So tragic. So rare in children. She paused. They haven't thought to check the vitamins I give him every night. The ones with the special powder mixed in. My stomach lurched violently. I pressed my palms against my mouth, biting down on my own fingers to keep from screaming, from vomiting, from making any sound that would give away my presence. Poison. She was poisoning my grandson. Disguising it as vitamins. Watching him deteriorate day by day, week by week, pretending to be the devastated mother while she slowly killed him for money. For money. All those times she'd called me, her voice trembling with fake concern. Linda, I'm so worried about Evan. He's been so tired lately. The doctors can't figure out what's wrong. All those times I'd rushed over with soup, with groceries, with offers to help, thinking she was overwhelmed, thinking she was scared, thinking she was a mother desperate to save her child. And all along, she'd been the one destroying him. How much longer? The lawyer asked. The doctors say his blood counts are critical, Tara replied matter-of-factly. Here at the hospital, it's even easier to control the variables. I have access to as far as the mother. No one questions me. They bring me coffee and tell me to be strong. She laughed again, that horrible, bright sound. In 2 or 3 more days, his heart will simply give out. It will look completely natural. It happens all the time with severe anemia. The statistics are on our side. 2 or 3 days. She was giving my grandson 2 or 3 more days of life, and she was discussing it like it was a project deadline, like he was a problem to be solved, like his death was just another item to check off her list. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the cold linoleum floor, my whole body shaking. Tears poured down my face silently, endlessly, soaking into my collar. I bit my fist to keep from sobbing out loud. Nurse Vega crouched beside me, her hand finally touching my shoulder, squeezing gently. The voices outside continued, something about signing dates, about hospital protocols, about how to handle the funeral arrangements to maximize sympathy. Each word was a knife. Each sentence carved deeper into my heart, into my understanding of how blind I'd been, how stupid, how trusting. When I heard the lawyer's footsteps finally recede down the hallway, I thought it was over. I thought I could breathe. I thought maybe I could stand up, march into that room, and tear Tara apart with my bare hands. But she stayed. I could hear her breathing on the other side of the wall, just feet away. Could feel her presence like a dark cloud pressing down on everything. And then she spoke, quietly, almost to herself, but loud enough that the words carried through the door, through the walls, straight into my shattered heart. Poor Linda, she whispered, and my blood turned to ice. Still playing the devoted grandmother. Still thinking she matters. Still believing I'd let her interfere. Her voice hardened, sharpened into something cruel. Once this is over, once Evan's gone and the money's transferred, I'll make sure she never had the chance to see him anyway. I'll tell everyone she was the crazy old woman who tried to take him from me. Who made wild accusations. Who lost her mind with grief and tried to blame me for her own son's failures. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Even in death, she was planning to steal my grandson from me. To make sure I couldn't mourn him, couldn't visit his grave, couldn't even speak his name without people looking at me with pity and suspicion. She was going to kill him and make me the villain. I heard her footsteps finally move away, heading into room 214, and then the soft click of the door closing behind her. For a long moment, neither Nurse Vega nor I moved. We just sat there in that supply closet, surrounded by medical supplies meant to save lives, while just next door a woman plotted to end one. Finally, Vega spoke, her voice barely a whisper. I know, she said. I know what you just heard. I know how impossible it seems. But listen to me carefully, I've been recording everything. She held up her phone. The screen glowed faintly in the darkness, voice recorder running, timestamp showing the last 12 minutes captured. I've suspected her for a week, Vega said, her voice tight with controlled fury. Evan's test results don't match any natural illness pattern. The blood work shows chemical inconsistencies. I've worked pediatric toxicology long enough to recognize deliberate poisoning when I see it. She paused, and her voice cracked slightly. My little brother died the same way when I was 19. Stepmother did it for the insurance money. I never proved it. I couldn't save him. I won't let it happen again. My mind was spinning, drowning, gasping for air that wouldn't come. Everything I'd believed, everything I'd trusted, every assumption I'd made about my family, it was all a lie. Why would you? How did you know to? Because I see you, she said, and her eyes were wet now too. I see you coming here every single day. I see you reading to him, bringing his favorite snacks, staying late when visiting hours are over because you can't stand to leave him alone. I see the way he lights up when you walk in, the way he asks for you every night. She gripped my shoulder harder. And I see her, the way she watches him like he's an obstacle instead of a child. The way she's always too busy to comfort him when he cries. The way she smiles at the doctors when they deliver bad news. She pulled up something on her tablet, medical charts, blood test results, numbers and graphs that I couldn't fully comprehend, but that painted a clear picture: deliberate, systematic poisoning. You're the only family he has who actually loves him, Vega said. You're the only one she underestimates. She thinks you're just a powerless old woman. That's our weapon. I looked up at her through my tears, through the shattered pieces of my world. What do I do? I whispered. Nurse Vega's jaw set, her eyes hardening with determination. We fight back. Together. But I need you to be brave for a little longer. Can you do that? I thought of Daniel, dying 2 years ago in that construction accident, making me promise in those final moments to always protect his boy. I thought of Evan, small and trusting, calling me every night before bed to say, "I love you, Grandma," in his sleepy voice. I thought of that woman, that monster, standing just feet away, planning his death like it was a business transaction. My fear crystallized into something harder. Something sharper. Something that burned hot enough to melt the terror into fury. My grandson wasn't sick by accident, he was being killed. I pressed my palms to my mouth until my fingers ached, until the pain anchored me, until I could breathe again. And then I looked at Nurse Vega and nodded. Tell me what to do. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. I sat on that cold linoleum floor, trying to process what I'd just heard. Trying to understand how the woman my son had married could be capable of something so monstrous. Nurse Vega stayed crouched beside me, giving me space to breathe. Finally, she spoke, her voice gentler now. My brother's name was Miguel. He was 8 years old when our stepmother started poisoning him. The doctors thought it was leukemia. Her voice cracked. He died 6 months later. It wasn't until years afterward that I found her journal. She documented everything, the doses, the timing, the insurance policies. I turned to look at her, saw the old grief etched into her face. I was 19. Nobody believed me. She wiped her eyes. I switched to pediatric nursing after that. I told myself I'd never miss the signs again. She pulled out her tablet, showed me graphs and numbers. This is Evan's blood work from 3 weeks ago, perfectly healthy. This is from yesterday. She pointed to red warning indicators. His red blood cells are being destroyed. But here's what the doctors aren't seeing: trace amounts of arsenic derivatives and warfarin. A blood thinner. In a 7-year-old child. My stomach churned. Is the recording enough? It's a start. But we need to catch her in the act. Vega stood up, offered me her hand. Dr. Harris is on duty tonight. We need to brief him before she makes her next move. I took her hand. What do you need me to do? 10 minutes later, we stood in a small conference room. Dr. Harris, a silver-haired man in his 50s, listened to the recording with his face growing darker. When it finished, he was silent. I've been treating that boy for a week, he finally said. And she's been killing him right under our noses. We need police involvement, Vega said. But carefully. If Tara suspects anything, she could accelerate her timeline. I'll contact Detective Audrey Chin, Dr. Harris said. But it'll take hours to set up proper surveillance. He turned to me. Mrs. Rolfe, you need to act completely normal. Tara can't suspect that you know anything. You need to go into that room, Vega said. Be the worried grandmother. If you seem too controlled, she'll know something's wrong. My hands clenched. You want me to pretend? I know what I'm asking, Vega said quietly. But if we're going to save Evan, we need her to believe she's still in control. I closed my eyes, thought of Daniel. Okay. I can do this. Room 214 was dimly lit. Evan lay in the hospital bed, so small and pale. Fur lines snaked from his thin arms. Monitors beeped steadily. Tara sat beside his bed, her head in her hands. When the door opened, her face transformed into exhausted sorrow. Linda, she breathed. Thank God you're here. She moved to hug me, and it took every ounce of willpower not to recoil. Instead, I let her embrace me while I looked at my grandson. What happened? I asked, my voice shaking with rage I had to contain. They don't know, Tara said, wiping her eyes. Real tears. He collapsed at school. The doctors say his blood counts are critical. Her voice broke. Some kind of autoimmune disease. I moved past her to Evan's bedside, touched his small hand. Baby, I whispered. Grandma's here. His eyelids fluttered but didn't open. He's been sedated, Tara said. They said it's better for him to rest. A pause. If he can. The casual cruelty made my spine stiffen. What are the doctors doing? I asked. They've tried everything, Tara said. They're talking about preparing for the worst. Her hand landed on my shoulder. Linda, we might need to start thinking about what Daniel would have wanted. I turned to face her, let her see my tears, my apparent helplessness. He's 7 years old. I know, Tara said softly. But sometimes God has other plans. Can I stay with him? Something flickered in Tara's eyes, but then she nodded. Of course. I need to make some calls. She gathered her purse. I'll be back in an hour. She paused at the door. Linda, I know we've had our differences. But I hope you know that I love Evan. That I'm doing everything I can for him. The lie was so smooth, so practiced. I know you are, I said. You're his mother. She smiled and left. The moment the door closed, my knees buckled. I've got eyes on her, Vega's voice said softly, slipping in. She's heading toward the cafeteria. 2 hours passed. Vega came and went, coordinating with Dr. Harris and Detective Chin. Security footage was being reviewed. Lab samples were being sent to forensics. I stayed by Evan's bedside, holding his hand, whispering stories he couldn't hear. When Tara returned, she looked tired but composed. She'd changed her blouse, reapplied her makeup. Any changes? She asked. No. He's been sleeping. She set down a coffee cup. I brought you something. I looked at the cup and wondered if it was poisoned. My stomach's too upset. She shrugged. Suit yourself. We sat in silence, only the beep of monitors filling the space. Then Tara's phone buzzed. Something in her expression shifted. Hardened. I need to make a call, she said abruptly. Private. She left, and through the window, I could see her pacing, phone pressed to her ear. 2 minutes later, Vega appeared. That was the lawyer, she whispered urgently. He's telling her to move tonight. He says there's been unusual activity in the hospital's legal department. Her face was pale. Linda, she knows someone's looking. She's going to accelerate the plan. My blood turned to ice. What does that mean? She's going to try to finish this tonight. Detective Chen is 40 minutes out. Hospital security is being briefed, but Tara still has legal access to this room. So what do we do? We wait. We watch. And when she makes her move, Vega's jaw set. We stop her. The door opened. Tara walked back in, and there was something different about her now. Something colder. She looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. Linda, she said slowly. How long have you been here? When exactly did you arrive? My heart stopped. I came right after you called. Funny, Tara interrupted. Because the receptionist just told me you arrived over 2 hours ago. That's a long time to wait. What were you doing, Linda? Where were you? The air felt suddenly thin. She smiled at me then, a smile that held no warmth, no humanity. She smiled at me like a woman who'd already won. And for the first time, I believed she might have been right, unless we moved now. Tara's question hung in the air like a noose tightening around my neck. I got lost, I said, forcing my voice to tremble with confusion rather than fear. These hallways all look the same. I had to ask for directions twice. Tara studied me for a long moment, her eyes searching my face for any crack in the performance. Then she seemed to relax slightly, though suspicion still lurked behind her expression. You should go home, Linda, she said, her tone suddenly solicitous. Get some rest. You look exhausted. I'll call you if anything changes. No, I said, perhaps too quickly. I softened my voice. Please. I need to be here. For Evan. For Danny's boy. Something flickered across her face, annoyance, maybe, or calculation, but she nodded. Suit yourself. I'm going to the cafeteria. Do you want anything? No, thank you. The moment she left, Vega materialized at the doorway, her face urgent. Detective Audrey just arrived. She's setting up in the security office with 2 uniformed officers. We're running out of time, Tara's lawyer texted her again. They're planning to move within the hour. She checked her watch. We need to force her hand now. Dr. Harris appeared behind her, holding a sealed 4 bag. This is the replacement, he said quietly. Clean saline solution. I'm going to swap it out now and document the exchange. The contaminated bag goes straight to forensics. He looked at me. Mrs. Rolfe, I need you to step outside for just a moment. If Tara returns and sees us tampering with Evan's 4, she might panic. My legs felt like lead as I moved into the hallway. Through the window, I watched Dr. Harris work quickly, disconnecting the 4 line, removing the existing bag, replacing it with the clean one. Vega photographed each step with her phone, documenting the chain of custody. Got it, Dr. Harris said, emerging with the contaminated bag sealed in a clear evidence container. Security cameras are recording everything in that room now. Audio and video. When she makes her move, we'll have it all. What if she doesn't? I asked. What if she waits? What if? She won't wait, Vega said grimly. She thinks someone's onto her. She'll act tonight. She has to. I returned to Evan's room, sat in the chair beside his bed, and waited. Every minute felt like an hour. Every sound in the hallway made my heart jump. 15 minutes later, Tara returned carrying a small paper bag. I brought you a muffin, she said, setting it on the table beside me. You should eat something. Thank you, I managed. She settled into the chair on the opposite side of Evan's bed, pulled out her phone, and began scrolling through messages. The picture of a worried mother passing time during a vigil. But I saw the way her eyes kept darting to the 4 bag. To the access port. To the hallway beyond the door. She was waiting for something. For the right moment. An hour passed. Then another. The hallway outside grew quieter as the evening shift settled in. Fewer footsteps. Longer stretches of silence. Tara stood up, stretched. I need to use the restroom. Will you be okay here for a few minutes? Of course. She left, and the moment she was gone, Vega's voice came through the small communication device Dr. Harris had clipped to my collar, hidden beneath my sweater. She's not going to the restroom. She's going to her car. We think she's getting something, probably the poison. Stay calm. When she comes back, we need you to leave the room. Make an excuse. Say you need coffee, need air, anything. We need her alone with Evan and the cameras. My hands gripped the armrests. You want me to leave him alone with her? We'll be watching every second. The 4 has been replaced, anything she adds to it now won't reach him. We need her to try. We need her to incriminate herself beyond any doubt. Every instinct screamed against it, but I forced myself to nod, even though Vega couldn't see me. 10 minutes later, Tara returned. Her purse seemed slightly fuller, hanging heavier on her shoulder. I stood up, making a show of steadying myself against the chair. I need some air, I said. Maybe some coffee. Would you like anything? No, I'm fine, Tara said, already moving toward Evan's bedside. Take your time. I walked out on shaking legs, every step taking me farther from my grandson, from the monster who wanted him dead. In the hallway, I pressed my back against the wall, my hand over my mouth. Vega appeared beside me, pulled me toward the security office 3 doors down. Inside, Detective Audrey Martinez, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, gestured to the monitor showing room 214 in perfect clarity. We watched Tara look around, check the hallway through the door's window, then reach into her purse. She pulled out a small glass vial. Got her, Detective Martinez murmured into her radio. All units stand by. On the screen, Tara uncapped the vial, produced a syringe from her purse, and carefully drew the liquid into it. Her movements were practiced, confident. She'd done this before. She approached the 4-line, located the port, and began to insert the needle. Now, Detective Martinez said. The door to room 214 burst open. 2 uniformed officers entered, followed by Detective Martinez herself, moving with swift precision. Step away from the patient, Martinez commanded. Step away now. Tara jumped back, the syringe still in her hand, her face draining of color. What is this? I'm his mother, I'm just. You're under arrest for attempted murder, Martinez said. Put the syringe down. Now. This is insane. Tara's voice rose, shrill and desperate. I was checking his 4, I was. We have you on video, Martinez interrupted. We have audio recordings of you discussing his murder with your lawyer. We have the contaminated 4 bag you've been using. And we have that syringe in your hand, which I'm betting contains enough poison to kill a child twice his size. Tara's eyes darted around the room wildly, looking for an escape that didn't exist. Her gaze landed on the camera in the corner, then on the door, where I now stood with Vega beside me. Her face transformed from panic to pure hatred. You, she hissed. You did this. You pathetic, meddling old bitch. You couldn't just stay out of it, could you? You couldn't just let me have what I deserved. What you deserved. I stepped forward, my voice shaking but strong. You were killing a child. An innocent 7-year-old child. For money. He was in the way. Tara screamed, and the mask finally fell completely away, revealing the monster beneath. Daniel left everything to him, everything that should have been mine. I wasted 7 years married to your pathetic son, playing the devoted wife, playing the loving mother, and for what? To watch everything go to some brat when I was the one who suffered. Enough, Detective Martinez said. She nodded to the officers, who moved forward. Tara tried to run. She actually tried to bolt for the door, the syringe still clutched in her hand. One of the officers caught her arm, and in the struggle, the syringe fell, hit the floor, and rolled under Evan's bed. No. Let me go. You don't understand, I need that money. I deserve it. I earned it. The officers handcuffed her while she screamed, thrashed, spat venom with every breath. Tara Rolfe, Detective Martinez said formally, "You're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and child endangerment. You have the right to remain silent." But Tara wasn't silent. She screamed all the way down the hallway, her voice echoing off the walls until it finally faded into the distance. The room fell quiet except for the steady beep of Evan's monitors. I moved to his bedside, touched his small hand, whispered, "It's okay now, baby. You're safe. Grandma's got you." Dr. Harris entered, already checking Evan's vitals. "The 4 is clean, nothing she tried to inject reached him. But we need to run full toxicology panels, start him on chelation therapy to remove what's already in his system." He stopped mid-sentence. One of the monitors began beeping erratically. "His heart rate's dropping," a nurse said, rushing in. "BP's falling." "What's happening?" I cried. "You said the 4 was clean." "It's his body," Dr. Harris said, already barking orders. "The cumulative damage from the poisoning, his system's crashing. Get me a crash cart. Now." The room erupted into controlled chaos. Nurses flooded in. Equipment appeared. Hands worked over Evan's small body while I stood there, helpless, watching the numbers on the screens plummet. "Come on, son," Dr. Harris murmured, pressing a stethoscope to Evan's chest. "Come on. Fight." The monitor's beeping grew slower. More irregular. And then it flatlined. The monitor screamed a flat, impossible sound. For a moment the whole world was swallowed by that shriek. "Clear." Dr. Harris's voice cut through the chaos as the defibrillator paddles pressed against Evan's small chest. His body jerked, arched off the bed, then fell still again. The monitor continued its horrible, flat scream. Again, Dr. Harris ordered. "Charging to 150. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. Vega's arm wrapped around my shoulders, holding me upright as my knees threatened to give way. "Clear." Another jolt. Another terrible moment of suspension where time itself seemed to stop. And then, a blip on the monitor. A single beat. Then another. "We've got a rhythm," a nurse called out. "Sinus tatch, but it's holding." "Get me an AP drip," Dr. Harris said, his voice still urgent but steadier now. "And I want continuous cardiac monitoring. Someone page cardiology. I want to consult within the hour." The beeping continued, irregular but persistent. Life, stubborn and fighting back. I sagged against Vega, tears streaming down my face. "He's stable," Dr. Harris said, finally looking at me. "For now. But Mrs. Rolfe, I won't lie to you, the next 48 hours are critical. The poison has done significant damage to his cardiovascular system. His body is trying to recover, but it's been through hell. Can I stay with him?" I whispered. I wouldn't have it any other way. The night stretched endlessly. Nurses rotated through every hour, checking vitals, adjusting medications, recording numbers on charts that told stories I couldn't fully read. But I understood enough. Each hour that passed without another crash was a victory. Each stable reading was a small miracle. Vega stayed with me through most of it, bringing coffee I didn't drink, offering food I couldn't eat. Around 3 in the morning, she pulled a chair beside mine. "You should rest," she said gently. "I can't. I promised Daniel." My voice cracked. 2 years ago, at his funeral, I put my hand on his coffin and I promised I'd always protect Evan. Always. And I failed. I let that woman into our lives. I trusted her. I was so blind. "You weren't blind," Vega interrupted. "You were a mother who wanted to believe her son had found happiness. You were a grandmother who wanted to believe her grandson had a loving parent. That's not blindness, Linda. That's hope. That's love. Love that almost killed him. Love that saved him," she corrected firmly. "If you hadn't been here today, if you hadn't cared enough to notice the strangeness in Tara's voice, if you hadn't rushed to this hospital when every bone in your body must have been telling you to rest, he'd be dead. She would have finished what she started, and no one would have questioned it. You saved his life by simply showing up. I looked at Evan, at his small face still too pale against the white pillow, at the gentle rise and fall of his chest. Will he remember any of this? I asked. Probably not the worst parts. Children's minds protect them sometimes. Vega squeezed my hand. But he'll remember that you were here. That you stayed. That matters more than you know. Around 4 a.m, Evan's fingers twitched in mine. His eyelids fluttered. Grandma? His voice was barely a whisper, rough from the breathing tube they'd removed hours earlier. I'm here, baby, I said, leaning closer. I'm right here. My tummy hurts. I know, sweetheart. The doctors are helping you feel better. You're going to be okay. His eyes closed again, but his hand squeezed mine weakly before he drifted back to sleep. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever felt. Morning brought Dr. Harris with a tablet full of results and a grim expression that somehow carried a thread of hope. The full toxicology panel came back, he said, showing me charts I still couldn't fully decipher. Arsenic trioxide, small doses administered over at least 6 weeks. Warfarin, larger doses over the past 2 weeks. And traces of several other compounds designed to suppress immune function and damage red blood cells. In English, please, I said quietly. She was poisoning him slowly, methodically. The arsenic weakened him gradually, made him tired, made him sick in ways that looked like childhood illness. The warfarin prevented his blood from clotting properly and accelerated the destruction of his red blood cells. Combined, they created the perfect storm. Symptoms that mimicked autoimmune disease while actually being deliberate poisoning. But he'll recover? With chelation therapy to remove the heavy metals, blood transfusions to replace what's been destroyed, and time, yes. He should make a full recovery. His young age actually works in his favor. Children's bodies are remarkably resilient. He paused. But if we'd waited even another day, if she'd succeeded last night. He didn't need to finish the sentence. The evidence, I said. Is it enough? More than enough. The contaminated 4-bag, the syringe she tried to use, the toxicology results, the video footage, he shook his head. Detective Martinez says it's one of the most clear-cut cases she's ever seen. Tara's going away for a very long time. Detective Martinez arrived mid-morning, looking like she hadn't slept either. She carried a thick folder that she set on the table beside Evan's bed. Mrs. Rolfe, I need to talk to you about what we've uncovered. I gestured for her to continue. Tara's real name is Tara Elizabeth Winters. She changed it legally 8 years ago, just before she met your son. Martinez opened the folder, pulled out several documents. Before Daniel, she was married twice. First husband died in a suspicious car accident 3 years into their marriage. She inherited his life insurance and a small property. Second husband died of complications from diabetes, except our investigation shows he wasn't diabetic before he married her. My stomach turned. She's done this before. We believe so. Both cases were ruled accidental or natural causes at the time, but we're reopening them now. The lawyer you heard on the recording, Mark Stevenson, has been her accomplice in at least 2 previous insurance fraud schemes. He's been arrested and is already trying to make a deal. How many people has she killed? I whispered. We don't know yet. But we're finding a pattern going back at least 15 years. She targets men with assets, marries them, waits for the opportune moment, and then. Martinez's jaw tightened. With Evan, it was different. She couldn't wait for him to grow up and potentially challenge her claims to Daniel's estate. She needed him gone now. The cruelty of it was staggering. What happens next? She's being held without bail. The DA is filing charges, attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and we're adding more as the investigation continues. With the evidence we have, she's looking at life in prison without parole. Possibly multiple life sentences once we prove the other cases. And Evan? What about his custody? You're his next of kin and his grandmother. Unless you're deemed unfit, which you clearly aren't, custody will transfer to you. There'll be court proceedings, but they're mostly formalities at this point. Relief flooded through me so powerfully I nearly sobbed. He's really safe now. He's really safe. She'll never touch him again. 3 days later, Evan was awake more often than not. His color was returning, pink creeping back into cheeks that had been gray and lifeless. He was asking for apple juice and complaining about the hospital food, beautiful, normal complaints that made me want to cry with gratitude. "Grandma," he said one afternoon, "where's Mom?" I'd been dreading this question. Vega had helped me prepare an answer that was truthful without being traumatizing. "Your mom had to go away for a while, sweetheart. She made some very bad choices, and now she has to face consequences for those choices." "Is she coming back?" "No, baby. She's not." He was quiet for a moment, processing. "Are you sad?" "I'm sad that she hurt you," I said carefully. "But I'm happy that you're getting better. And I'm happy that I get to take care of you now." "Forever?" "Forever." He smiled then, a real, genuine smile that lit up his whole face. "Good. I like it when you take care of me. You make the best pancakes." I laughed through my tears. "I'll make you pancakes every day if you want." "Every day might be too many pancakes," he said seriously. "Maybe just Saturdays." "Saturdays it is." By the end of the week, reporters had gotten wind of the story. "Grandmother saves grandson from murderous mother," ran the headlines. My phone rang constantly with requests for interviews, for statements, from my side of the story. Detective Martinez advised caution. "You don't owe them anything," she said. "But if you do decide to speak publicly, it could help. There might be other victims out there, other families Tara destroyed. Your story could give them courage to come forward." I thought about it for a long time. Thought about Daniel, about how he'd always valued truth even when it was painful. Thought about Evan, about the life he deserved, one without secrets, without shame, without hiding from what had happened. "I'll do it," I said finally. "But only after Evan is released from the hospital. Only after he's home and safe and starting to heal. The story can wait until he's ready." Martinez nodded approvingly. "That's wise. And Mrs. Rolfe? For what it's worth, you're the bravest person I've met in a long time." "I'm not brave," I said. "I'm just a grandmother who refused to look away." That evening, Martinez called me back into the conference room. Her expression was grave. "We've confirmed 3 other deaths connected to Tara," she said quietly. 2 former husbands and a boyfriend from before she changed her name. "And we're investigating 2 more cases, men who died under suspicious circumstances after brief relationships with her." 5 people, I breathed. "She killed 5 people? Possibly more. The pattern goes back further than we initially thought. She's been doing this for nearly 2 decades, Linda. Moving from state to state, changing her appearance slightly, always targeting men with assets and no close family to ask questions." I felt sick. And no one stopped her. No one saw the pattern until now. Until you forced us to look. Martinez closed the folder. "She wasn't just a monster, Mrs. Rolfe. She was a serial killer. And you stopped her. They'd found a pattern. She wasn't an accident, a single monster, she was a line, and the line led to other broken lives." 6 months later, I stood outside the courthouse steps, my hand gripping Evan's tightly. He wasn't required to be here. The judge had already taken his testimony privately in chambers, sparing him the spectacle of a public trial. But he'd insisted on coming for the opening day. "I want to see her face when they tell everyone what she did," he'd said with the fierce certainty only an 8-year-old could muster. The courthouse loomed above us, all granite columns and imposing architecture designed to make you feel the weight of justice. Reporters clustered around the entrance like hungry birds, cameras flashing, Voices calling out questions I'd learned to ignore. Mrs. Rolfe. How do you feel about facing your daughter-in-law today? Linda. Is it true Tara killed 5 other people? Will Evan testify in open court? I kept my head down, kept moving forward. Vega walked on my other side, her presence a steady anchor. She'd taken a leave of absence from the hospital to be here, to see this through to the end. Inside, the courtroom was already packed. Spectators filled every available seat. I recognized some faces, family members of Tara's previous victims who'd come forward after the arrests made headlines. Others were strangers drawn by the sensational nature of the case, the grandmother who'd saved her grandson from a serial killer masquerading as a grieving mother. We took our seats in the front row, directly behind the prosecution's table. Assistant District Attorney Rachel Morrison turned and gave me a reassuring nod. She was young, maybe 35, but she had the focused intensity of someone who understood exactly what was at stake. Tara was led in moments later, dressed in a conservative gray suit that someone had clearly chosen to make her look sympathetic. Her hair was pulled back, her makeup minimal. She looked small, vulnerable, nothing like the monster I knew her to be. When her eyes found mine across the courtroom, something flickered there, hatred, or maybe fear. It was gone in an instant, replaced by a mask of wounded dignity. All rise, the bailiff announced. The Honorable Judge Patricia Whitmore presiding. And so it began. ADA Morrison's opening statement was methodical and devastating. She laid out the timeline with surgical precision: Daniel's death 2 years ago, Tara's immediate focus on securing his assets, the slow poisoning of Evan that began shortly after, the conspiracy with lawyer Mark Stevenson to accelerate the inheritance process. The evidence will show, Morrison said, pacing before the jury box, that the defendant, Tara Elizabeth Winters, also known as Tara Rolfe, systematically poisoned a 7-year-old child over the course of 6 weeks. Not in a moment of passion. Not in a fit of rage. But deliberately, calculatedly, with full knowledge that she was ending an innocent life for financial gain. She paused, let that sink in. You will hear testimony from Nurse Letitia Vega, who first suspected the poisoning and gathered crucial evidence. From Dr. Nathan Harris, who treated Evan and confirmed the presence of multiple toxic substances in his bloodstream. From Detective Audrey Martinez, who uncovered a pattern of suspicious deaths following the defendant wherever she went. Morrison walked to the evidence table, picked up a small glass vial sealed in clear plastic. This is the syringe the defendant was caught attempting to inject into Evan Rolfe's foreline. Laboratory analysis shows it contained a lethal dose of arsenic trioxide, enough to kill an adult, let alone a child. She was stopped just seconds before she could complete the murder. Several jurors shifted uncomfortably. One woman in the back row had tears in her eyes. Most damning of all, Morrison continued, you will hear the defendant's own voice, recorded as she discussed her plans with her attorney. You will hear her describe the poisoning. You will hear her express satisfaction at the thought of a child's death. You will hear her mock the grandmother who loved that child enough to fight for him. She turned to face Tara directly. The evidence will prove beyond any reasonable doubt that Tara Winters is not a grieving widow or a devoted mother. She is a predator who has spent 20 years moving from victim to victim, leaving a trail of bodies and stolen fortunes in her wake. And this time, finally, she was caught. The prosecution's case unfolded over 3 days. Vega took the stand first, describing how she'd noticed the irregularities in Evan's blood work, how she'd started documenting Tara's movements, how she'd recorded that fateful conversation in the hallway. The defense attorney, a sharp-faced man named Gerald Hutchins, tried to rattle her during cross-examination. Nurse Vega, isn't it true that you have a personal vendetta against stepmothers? That your own stepmother was accused of? My stepmother murdered my brother, Vega said evenly, cutting him off. And because no one believed me, because no one took the time to look closely enough, she got away with it. I became a pediatric nurse specifically to prevent that from happening to another child. If that makes me biased, then yes, I'm biased in favor of children surviving. The jury seemed to appreciate her honesty. Dr. Harris presented the medical evidence, charts showing the progression of Evan's poisoning, toxicology reports confirming the presence of multiple toxic substances, expert analysis explaining how the combination of poisons mimicked autoimmune disease. Detective Martinez testified about the investigation's expansion, about discovering Tara's previous identities, about the 3 confirmed murders and 2 more under investigation. We found life insurance policies in each case, Martinez explained. Always purchased shortly after marriage or the start of a serious relationship. Always with the defendant as the sole beneficiary. And in every case, the victim died within 18 to 36 months, allowing the defendant to collect the payout and move on to her next target. Hutchins fought back hard during cross-examinations, trying to poke holes in the evidence chain, suggesting contamination of samples, questioning the admissibility of the recordings. But the evidence was too solid, too comprehensive. Every attack he mounted seemed to only reinforce the prosecution's case. On the 4th day, Morrison called me to the stand. My legs felt unsteady as I walked to the witness box, placed my hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth. The courtroom seemed impossibly large from this vantage point, all those eyes watching, waiting. Mrs. Rolfe, Morrison began gently, can you tell the jury about the day you received the phone call that Evan had been hospitalized? I took a breath, steadied myself, and began. I told them about folding Evan's superhero shirts when the phone rang. About Tara's cold, clipped voice saying, you can come if you want, as if seeing my grandson in crisis was optional. I told them about running through those hospital corridors, my heart pounding, desperate to reach him. And what happened when you reached the 2nd floor? Morrison asked. Nurse Vega pulled me aside. She told me to hide, to wait, to trust her. My voice strengthened as I continued. I didn't understand why at first. But then I heard them, Tara and her lawyer, standing right outside Evan's room, discussing how to transfer his inheritance once he was gone. Talking about his death like it was a business transaction they were arranging. What exactly did you hear the defendant say? I looked directly at Tara as I recited her words. Once the boy's gone, everything passes to me. Daniel always said I couldn't manage money. Turns out I'll manage all of it, once Evan's gone. Tara's face remained carefully neutral, but I saw her hands clenched beneath the table. And then? Morrison prompted. Then she described how she was poisoning him. Said the doctors thought it was autoimmune disease. Said they hadn't checked the vitamins she gave him every night, the ones with the special powder. She said in 2 or 3 more days, his heart would simply give out. That it would look completely natural. A few jurors were openly crying now. Hutchins's cross-examination was brutal. He suggested I'd misheard. He implied I was a jealous mother-in-law looking for someone to blame for my son's death. He questioned my memory, my hearing, my mental state. Mrs. Rolfe, isn't it true that you never approved of your son's marriage? I wanted my son to be happy, I said steadily. I would have welcomed any woman who truly loved him and his child. But you didn't welcome the defendant, did you? You viewed her as an outsider, an interloper. I viewed her as my grandson's mother, I interrupted. Until I heard her planning his murder. Then I viewed her as what she is, a killer. Objection. Hutchins snapped. Sustained, Judge Whitmore said. Mrs. Rolfe, please answer only the questions asked. But the jury had heard it. And they believed it. I could see it in their faces. On the 5th day, the prosecution presented testimony from family members of Tara's previous victims. Margaret Chen, widow of Tara's first husband, described how her son had died suddenly at age 41, how Tara had collected $200,000 in life insurance and disappeared. I always thought something was wrong, Margaret said, her voice breaking. The way she pushed for the cremation so quickly. The way she moved out of state within a month. But the police said it was a tragic accident, and I had no proof. No one listened. James Patterson's sister testified about her brother's mysterious death from diabetic complications, when he'd never been diabetic before meeting Tara. The insurance payout had been $350,000. The pattern was undeniable. The jury saw it. The gallery saw it. Even Hutchins seemed to realize his case was crumbling. In desperation, he called Tara to testify in her own defense. It was a mistake. Tara took the stand with practiced composure, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, describing herself as a devoted mother destroyed by circumstances she couldn't control. I loved Evan like my own son, she said, her voice trembling. I would never hurt him. This is all a terrible misunderstanding. Morrison's cross-examination was surgical. Ms. Winters, did you or did you not discuss transferring Evan's inheritance with attorney Mark Stevenson? We discussed legal matters, yes, but... Did you or did you not say the words, once the boy's gone, everything passes to me? Tara hesitated. Those words are taken out of context. The jury will hear the recording in its entirety. Context included. Did you say those words? Yes, but I didn't mean. Did you administer arsenic trioxide to Evan Rolfe? No. Then why were your fingerprints on the vial found in your purse? Why does the pharmacy record show you purchased arsenic-based rat poison 2 months ago using a fake name? Tara's composure cracked. I want my lawyer. You are being cross-examined, Ms. Winters. Answer the question. I don't, this isn't fair. Judge Whitmore banged her gavel. The witness will answer the question or be held in contempt. But Tara couldn't answer. She sat there, trapped, her mask finally slipping to reveal the panic beneath. Morrison let the silence stretch, let the jury see the real Tara Winters. No further questions, she finally said. Closing arguments came the next day. Hutchins made a half-hearted attempt to suggest reasonable doubt, but his heart clearly wasn't in it. Morrison delivered a powerful summation, reminding the jury of the evidence, the testimony, the undeniable pattern of death and greed. The defendant sits before you today not as a victim of circumstance, but as a calculating predator who has stolen lives and fortunes for 2 decades. She would have stolen another life, an innocent child's life, if not for the courage of one grandmother who refused to look away. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood with the verdict slip in her trembling hands. On the count of attempted murder in the first degree, how do you find? Guilty. On the count of conspiracy to commit murder? Guilty. On the count of child endangerment? Guilty. Guilty on all 23 counts. The courtroom erupted. Tara collapsed into her chair, sobbing. Evan squeezed my hand so tightly it hurt. Judge Whitmore banged her gavel for order. Sentencing will be held in 2 weeks. Until then, the defendant will remain in custody without bail. As they led Tara away, she turned one last time to look at me. The hatred in her eyes was pure and undiluted. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I looked at the jury and said the thing I'd been too afraid to say aloud until then, she planned it. She wanted him dead. The courtroom held its breath. And then it was over. 2 weeks later, we returned to the courthouse for sentencing. The media circus had only intensified, national news outlets had picked up the story, crime podcasts were dissecting every detail, and the courthouse steps were even more crowded than before. But this time, I walked through that crowd with my head held high, Evan's hands secure in mine. Judge Whitmore's courtroom felt different now. The tension of the trial had been replaced by something heavier, the weight of consequences, of justice finally catching up with someone who'd evaded it for far too long. Tara was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit, her hair unwashed, her face bare of makeup. The transformation was startling. Without her carefully constructed mask, she looked older, harder, more like the predator she'd always been. Judge Whitmore shuffled papers on her bench, then looked directly at Tara. Ms. Winters, you have been found guilty by a jury of your peers on 23 felony counts, including attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, child endangerment, and multiple counts of fraud. Before I impose sentence, do you have anything to say? Tara stood slowly. For a moment, I thought she might apologize, might show some shred of remorse. Instead, she turned to look at me. I should have finished it when I had the chance, she said coldly. Both of them. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Even her own attorney looked horrified. Judge Whitmore's expression hardened. Thank you for removing any doubt about your character, Ms. Winters. Please face the bench. Tara turned back, her jaw set defiantly. The crimes you have committed represent a level of calculated cruelty that this court has rarely seen, Judge Whitmore continued. You systematically poisoned a 7-year-old child, not in a moment of passion, but over weeks, watching him suffer, manipulating his medical care, all while presenting yourself as a devoted mother. The psychological torture inflicted on this child, on his grandmother, and on the medical professionals who tried in good faith to save him, is unconscionable. She paused, letting the words settle. Furthermore, the evidence suggests a pattern of similar crimes spanning 2 decades and multiple states. While you are being sentenced today only for the crimes related to Evan Rolfe, the court is aware that additional charges are pending in other jurisdictions. Tara's face had gone pale. On the count of attempted murder in the first degree, I sentence you to 25 years to life in state prison. On the count of conspiracy to commit murder, an additional 15 years. On the counts of child endangerment and fraud, consecutive sentences totaling 20 years. Judge Whitmore looked up from her papers. These sentences will run consecutively, not concurrently. You will serve a minimum of 60 years before being eligible for parole. Given your age and the severity of your crimes, it is likely you will spend the rest of your natural life in prison. 60 years. Tara would be 93 before she could even be considered for parole. This court hopes, Judge Whitmore concluded, that your incarceration will serve as both punishment and protection, punishment for the lives you've destroyed, and protection for all the future victims you will never have the opportunity to harm. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that echoed through the silent courtroom. Tara's legs buckled. The bailiffs caught her before she fell, began leading her away. As she passed our row, she lunged toward us, screaming obscenities until the bailiffs physically restrained her and dragged her from the room. The courtroom erupted in applause. Judge Whitmore didn't stop it. Outside, Evan and I stood on the courthouse steps, blinking in the bright autumn sunlight. Reporters surged forward with questions, but Detective Martinez and her officers formed a protective barrier. Mrs. Rolfe, how do you feel about the sentence? Do you think justice was served? What's next for you and Evan? I looked down at my grandson, then back at the cameras. I feel relief, I said simply. Relief that she can never hurt another child. Relief that Evan is safe. And gratitude, for Nurse Vega, for Dr. Harris, for Detective Martinez, for everyone who believed us and helped us stop her. What would you say to other families who might be in similar situations? I thought about that carefully. I'd say trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, if you see patterns that don't make sense, speak up. Don't let anyone make you doubt what you know in your heart. And know that there are people who will listen, who will help, who will fight beside you. Vega appeared at my side, slipped her arm through mine. We have an announcement, she said to the cameras. Mrs. Rolfe and I are launching a non-profit organization called Project Guardian. Our mission is to train medical professionals, educators, and family members to recognize the signs of deliberate poisoning and abuse in children. We want to make sure what happened to Evan never happens to another child. The reporter scribbled furiously, cameras flashed, but I barely noticed. I was looking at Evan, who was smiling up at me with complete trust and love. Can we go home now, Grandma? He asked. Yes, baby. We can go home. 6 months after the sentencing, life had settled into a rhythm I'd never quite expected to find. Evan was thriving. The physical damage from the poisoning had healed completely, his blood counts were normal, his energy boundless, his appetite healthy. The psychological scars were taking longer, requiring weekly therapy sessions where he worked through his feelings about his mother, about what had happened, about trust and safety. But he was healing. I could see it in the way he laughed more easily now, in how he'd started making friends at his new school, in the way he'd begun asking questions about his father with curiosity rather than pain. Sunday lunches became our ritual. I'd make his favorite foods, pancakes with chocolate chips, macaroni and cheese from scratch, the oatmeal cookies Daniel had loved as a boy. We'd eat together at the small kitchen table, Evan telling me about his week, about the books he was reading, about the science project he was building. Mrs. Patterson says I'm really good at experiments, he said one Sunday, chocolate chip pancake syrup running down his chin. She says I'm methodical. That's a big word, I said, wiping his face with a napkin. It means I'm careful and I pay attention to details. He looked proud. Like you, Grandma. You paid attention to details and that's how you saved me. My throat tightened. You're right, sweetheart. Paying attention matters. Bedtime stories became another sacred ritual. We'd curl up in his bed, the one that used to be in my guest room and was now permanently his, and I'd read whatever he'd chosen that week. Sometimes it was superhero comics. Sometimes it was chapter books about magic and adventure. Sometimes it was books about feelings and families and healing. Grandma, he said one night after I'd finished reading, do you think Dad would be proud of me? Your father would be so proud he'd burst with it, I said, smoothing his hair back. You're brave and kind and smart, just like he was. Do you think he's watching us? I think if there's any way he can be, he is. And I think he's smiling. Evan nodded, satisfied, and closed his eyes. Within minutes, his breathing had deepened into sleep. I sat there watching him for a long time, this beautiful child who'd come so close to being stolen from the world, thinking about how fragile everything was, how quickly darkness could slip in when you weren't looking. But also thinking about how light could fight back. How love could be a weapon against evil when wielded with courage. Project Guardian officially launched in the spring. Vega and I had worked tirelessly to develop training programs, create educational materials, and build relationships with hospitals and schools across the state. Our first workshop was held at Memorial Hospital, the same hospital where everything had almost ended, now transformed into a place of new beginnings. 35 nurses, doctors, and social workers attended. Vega presented the medical aspects, the signs of poisoning, the patterns to watch for, the protocols for reporting suspicions. I spoke about the family perspective, about trusting instincts, about the importance of questioning when things didn't add up. The people who do this count on our politeness, I told the room. They count on us not wanting to offend, not wanting to accuse, not wanting to seem paranoid. They count on us being reasonable when they are being monstrous. Don't let courtesy silence your concerns. Don't let social niceties override your professional judgment. After the presentation, a young nurse approached me, tears in her eyes. My nephew, she whispered. He's been sick for months. The doctors can't figure out what's wrong. But his stepfather. She trailed off. I thought I was being paranoid. But after hearing you speak. Tell me everything, I said, taking her hand. We helped her file the necessary reports. Child Protective Services investigated. The boy was removed from the home and placed with his grandmother, the young nurse's mother. Tests revealed traces of antifreeze in his system. He was the first child Project Guardian helped save. He wouldn't be the last. 1 year after the trial, on a quiet Tuesday evening, I sat beside Evan's bed while he slept. His room was filled with the normal detritus of childhood, action figures scattered across the floor, drawings taped to the walls, books stacked haphazardly on his nightstand. Normal. Beautiful. Safe. I thought about that day in the hospital, about Nurse Vega's urgent whisper, hide and wait. At the time, those words had filled me with terror. Now I understood them differently. They weren't just instructions for a moment of crisis. They were a philosophy for survival, for resistance, for fighting back against darkness. Sometimes hiding isn't cowardice, it's strategy. Sometimes waiting isn't passivity, it's gathering strength. Sometimes the greatest act of courage is knowing when to be still and when to strike. Vega had taught me that. Evan had taught me that. This whole terrible, beautiful journey had taught me that. I was no longer the invisible grandmother, the one easily dismissed, the one people talked around and over and through. I had found my voice. I had found my power. I had discovered that love, true, fierce, protective love, was the strongest force in the world when you refused to let it be silenced. My phone buzzed with a text from Vega, another training session confirmed for next month. This one in Ohio. We're making a difference, Linda. I smiled and typed back, we really are. Evan stirred in his sleep, mumbled something about dragons and homework, then settled back into peaceful dreams. I stood, kissed his forehead gently, and whispered the words I said to him every night, you're safe, baby. You're loved. And I'm never going anywhere. In the doorway, I paused to look back at him one more time. This child who'd been targeted by evil and survived. This child who'd taught me that being old didn't mean being powerless. This child who'd given me a purpose I'd never known I needed. I had rushed into that hospital terrified and small. I left larger, not because I had won every battle, but because I had learned how to fight. And I would keep fighting. For Evan. For every child whose voice wasn't loud enough to be heard. For every grandmother who thought she was invisible. Because I had learned the truth, none of us are invisible when we refuse to look away. I turned off the light and closed the door softly, leaving it open just a crack the way he liked it. Tomorrow, we had pancakes to make. Stories to read. A life to build. And I had never been more ready.